Hi, Dr. Pulsfer here with a question that's important for everybody, but especially for makers of historical games, and that is history inevitable? And I'll quote H.R. Trevor Roper: "History is not merely what happened, it is what happened in the context of what might have happened." So we're going to think about this in terms of games. And one way that I want to illustrate this is with a proverbial rhyme showing that small actions can result in large consequences, called "For Want of a Nail." For want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, the horse was lost. For want of a horse, the rider was lost. For want of a rider, the message was lost. For want of a message, the battle was lost. For want of a battle, the kingdom was lost. And all for the want of a horseshoe nail. Showing again that small things can make a big difference. There are also big historical trends that virtually nothing is going to make a difference to. It goes both ways. So what we need to keep in mind about the nature of history is merely what actually happened, not what was inevitable or even most likely, except on the very, very largest scale. Now, historians tend to spend a lot more time on why something happened or didn't happen than on what happened, because that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to explain things. And in an awful lot of cases, we don't know exactly what happened. Ordinary folk, on the other hand, perhaps rely too much on trying to pin down exactly what happened. They want absolutes. They think of history as events rather than of reasons. Now, what about games? The question is, does the game take whatever happened as inevitable? Sometimes a game does. Or does the game take it as most likely to happen? Maybe. Or does the game recognize that what actually happens is partly a matter of chance and may not be what was most likely to happen? It's certainly not inevitable, even if it is the most likely. We can ask, how predictable is history? And the answer is not very. Arnold Toynbee, a famous historian, in his series A Study of History, tried to construct a sequence that civilizations all follow, a pattern. And I read some of his works. There were quite a few different books. But there were so many exceptions that the pattern was disproved. He was always explaining away the exceptions to his pattern. And that doesn't make sense. The Decline of the West, a famous book, was an attempt to predict history. But I don't think it did very well. In Isaac Asimov's fictional Foundation series, Harry Seldon develops a means for predicting future history quite closely, but then a powerful mutant causes a massive deviation. So even in the science of a far future, the notion was something would happen that just couldn't be taken into account. History is not very predictable. If it were predictable, then governments and people would do a lot better job of figuring out what was going to happen. So, historical games that treat history as inevitable, tend to be puzzles. There's a correct solution that you follow, and that follows the course of actual history. So to succeed in the game, you have to follow the course of actual history. Some games may recognize other possibilities by having several correct solutions, perhaps even, quote, multiple paths to victory, unquote. Some games allow players to try all kinds of things, all kinds of strategies, to succeed in a lot of different ways. And that's the way history actually works. Because I dislike puzzles, I'm glad that games fit my view of how history works. I prefer games that allow many outcomes. Even in my game Britannia, which some call a scripted game, there are many, many possible outcomes. There are no solutions. Now, I'm not going to go into training, which is more like a puzzle, versus education, which is more like a game. As with history, the question is there just one right answer? In history's case, no. Thanks for listening.